Welcome to the Chess Channel, the channel where you can learn loads. Plenty of stuff has been going on since we last published our last video. The world champion has abdicated from the throne and is no longer going to defend his title. Magnus Carlsen additionally walks out from St. Louis after having lost from Hans Niemann in round 3. Rumors have it the world champion suspects foul play. In the meantime, while Magnus Carlsen walks out, the entire chess community is in shock. So why is Magnus suspicious of Hans cheating, and what proof does he have? Before you are able to enter the play hall in St. Louis, every single player is subjected to a detector scan. Something unbeknown to many is that Hans did have his account terminated from the most popular online chess platform for cheating, not on one occasion but twice. We shall be bringing more on this as news comes to light. Today, we shall be covering our 18th video. Though there are millions of games to choose from, we are going to look at something slightly different. If you are able to complete today's tasks, then congratulations are in order. This channel is about learning, and most importantly improving. Both learning and improving can be done through the use of different tools. One fast way to increase understanding is to use shortcuts if they are available. Shortcuts are extremely handy when you learn opening tricks and when you are able to apply them. We shall skip this process right now, and what we want to look at is how to seal results using not openings but endgames. Good and charismatic players need to work hard, they would need to memorize, and most importantly, if you wish to excel, you are additionally required to learn how to play and more around the chessboard without having a visual. In short, and in plain English, you will become a much better player if you are able to play out the moves without having the chessboard in front of you but instead in your head. Let's try this for example, and later on we shall be introducing the board. The white king is located on c7, there is white knight placed on f5, and white has 3 additional pawns. The first is on b3, the second is placed next to him on c2, and the third pawn is located on e4. Black in turn has only the king, and a single pawn placed on e2. So mentally, if we try and absorb what is going on the board, if black were to move, we would see the pawn on e2 promoting to a brand new queen. However, to add spice to this position, the side that is supposed to move is white. So what is going on and what side is winning? Can you try this puzzle without its diagrammatical presentation, and can you try and solve it? This would be the time to pause the video for as long as you need, and then with our return, we shall be introducing the actual chessboard in the event we were not able to solve it. Okay, provided you did what we suggested, are you still able to remember where all 7 pieces are supposed to be positioned? Given white has only 5 of them, and given black only 2, this should not be that hard to remember. If you need a visual, we have bothered to generate it. And here it is. The white king is on c7, the black king is on c5, and with the white knight sitting on f5, the 4 pawns are located as follows. One white pawn is on b2, the other on c2, and the last one is on e4. Black has a pawn on e2 that is expected to promote, and this is the very problem or puzzle if you like. Now that we have it appear on our screen, can you solve it, and can you tell what side wins? Provided everyone is ready, let's do it. Everything will work like a treat if you are able to find the very first move. Can you find it? This is what you are looking at. This push to c3 is the key to everything. If you do go on to promote to a brand new queen. I guess this puzzle is hard enough even when there is a visual. Maybe, just maybe, we should not have started things up with this puzzle. But does it really matter? I guess it doesn't. Coming back to the puzzle, after c3 and black queening, how can white make progress? As things stand, white has nearly everything covered. Only this pawn on e4 is vulnerable, but can he be saved? The second key move, which is as important as the first one, is this knight jump into d6. It momentarily protects the pawn on e4, but would this just be enough? With no checks in the making for black, what can black play here that would change the board dynamics? The answer is absolutely nothing. The first 2 moves were key, and if you were able to find them, what remains is the easy stuff. As things stand, there is a checkmate lurking in the background and black is simply unable to prevent it. How do you prevent b4 and how do you stop the checkmate? If you take this pawn on e4, the queen would need to drop, and even though the checkmate is momentarily delayed, you will not be able to stop it. King d5 going after the knight will or can lead to this push to b4, and should the knight drop, at least one of these two pawns walks. So in fact, what you are looking at is a mate in approximately 10 to 12 moves. If you alternatively get rid of this pawn, whether the queen is removed right away or not, you will still run into a checkmate. If you instead bypass bxc3 and try this check first, king d4 will lead to the queen to come off, and when this pawn also departs, this would be a close one but you can still get there. c4, king d4, and c5, and there is nothing the lone king can do to stop this pawn and ultimately the checkmate. If we return to the original setup, queen b1 still falls short. As soon as you launch this check, we will get to see exactly the same variation and the picture remains the same. If you take, and take, this pawn runs and the king will not be able to catch up with him. There is something else before we are able to conclude the analysis of this puzzle. After this push to c3, what if you do not promote right away, and choose to execute this king move instead? Are you able to work out how this one is likely to end? If you deliver this check, king d3 attacking the knight is not going to be enough. Getting the knight to back off to the second has to be the right move forward. It stops the pawn on e2 from promoting, but is there a way out for black? Should you go on and eliminate this pawn, after this thrust to b4, even if the knight comes under fire again, knight e1 and king e2, and with careful play, this pawn is going nowhere. You can still apply a knight check, but to take a shortcut, maybe this knight move to c2 is strong enough. In either case, even if the pawn is able to promote, the knight would be handed over, and in the end, one of these two pawns will walk. And this is or was our first puzzle. Puzzle number 2 is as exciting for the real chess enthusiast. This puzzle was in fact presented to the Philippines' very best, Wesley So, who is now representing the United States of America for a number of years. Wesley was given 3 puzzles to solve and had never disappointed. The challenge was significant because Wesley was not given the chessboard but was only told what piece lay where, and it was down to him to solve all 3 puzzles. We shall not be looking at all 3 puzzles but only one of them. And what we would like to do is to start in the same exact way as we started our first puzzle. It's again a 7-piece construction if we assume a pawn is a piece. In English it is not, but in other languages, a pawn is equal to a piece. So for the sake of simplicity, we shall use a pawn and equate him to a piece. What we need to remember mentally is the following setup. There is white king located on d1. White has also a single bishop located on d3, and finally, there is a rook placed on e6. Black has the king located on g5, black has also a knight positioned on c1, and in addition, black has a pawn on f5 and a pawn on h2. Are we able to remember what is positioned where without having a visual? White is to move and the aim is to find a way, any way, to stop black from promoting. If you are able to solve this puzzle without the aid of a diagram, then you may consider yourself to be in the same or similar leagues as Super Grandmaster Wesley So. We can provide a few seconds for everyone to digest this position, and in case you wish to see it all on the board, this is what we shall be doing in just a minute. Wesley So himself was presented by this puzzle, along with 2 other ones, but never used a visual as an aid. Next time we make noise, we shall be looking at the solution, and in addition, we shall also be using a diagram to make things that bit simpler. And here we are. As said earlier, we have a white king on d1, a bishop on d3, and white has a rook on e6. What black has is the king on g5, black has a knight on c1, and finally, black has 2 pawns. The first one is on f5 and the second one is on h2, ready to get promoted. Can white find a way to stop disaster from striking, and if so, what is there to do? For those who need a helping hand, let us now introduce the board with every single piece that we need on it. Can you now work this one out? How do you stop black from promoting to a brand new queen? Again, there is only one way to do this. The first move, just like our first puzzle, is key. What is this key move and can you find it? Believe it or not, this is the move you need. If you found it, you do need to be congratulated. If the bishop is removed, taking this pawn might not be enough. If you do go on to promote to a brand new queen, and there is basically nothing stopping you, returning the rook to block the check and retaliate can lead to this check, and should the knight depart, let's see what this check does. King d2, always staying close to the rook, will lead to this check, and if you now return the king to the first, the queen alone would not be able to enforce a checkmate. You can only do this with the help of the king. King f4, closing in, and something like rook e2, will lead to this check, and if you retaliate by blocking the check, this is what you might want to do. King c1 and king e3, and this one is going to end in disaster. King e3 closing in, and now you need to be careful. Rook c2, for example, leads to a checkmate in one single move, and no one is bound to miss it via this queen move. So if you try rook b2 instead, this check is going to be just about enough. Rook c2 and queen b4 can lead to the queen to cone under fire again in this way. Deliver this check, and the ending is near. Rook c2 will end in a mate in 1, and this mate is no different to the one we just looked at. If you try king b1, once the king closes in, this would be it. We shall be skipping the last few moves, but just remember this. It is difficult to end the game when there is a queen and rook on the board, and particularly if you are playing a blitz or rapid, when time is scarce. So what we saw in this instance is that black is able to win, but have we overlooked some important move? We did indeed. If we return to this position right after the bishop is dropped, rather than take this pawn, this is the right move to execute. This check is the key to everything. King f4 will lead to the rook to chase after the pawn, and if you rush the king to save this pawn, wouldn't this knight on c1 fall? He would. If you take him, would black be able to queen at least one of these two pawns and take over? The answer is not easy. King g2 can firstly run into this check, and if the king moves into f1, the rook can return to h5 to make sure this pawn is not going anywhere. There is another way to do this though. After king g2, there is this king move to the second, and what happens here is that what you see actually ends in draw. If you queen, everything won the first goes, but after the white king makes his move, the draw is secure. Coming back, as soon as this rook check is initiated, white does secure a draw. What is you try this king move to h6 instead, to allow the pawn to promote. If you do go on to get rid of this pawn, then you would have blown it. Black gets to promote with a check, and that would be the end of this game. So what is the right way to go about it here? It's this check from e6. King g5, another check, and the moves tend to repeat. If you try and go for this king move to f6, the rook now is able to sneak back into h5, and again this type of endings appears to be going nowhere. What the idea is here, is to just drop the pawn but save the knight. Knight d3 will lead to the pawn to drop, and what you now have is a classic case of a draw. So coming back to the initial setup of this puzzle, the key move to execute is this bishop move into e4. If you do not take the bishop and go for this avenue of play, you will be risking of paying a price. Bishop h1, knight d3, and there is a beautiful continuation in the making. Can you see it, and if so, what is it? It has to be this rook move into the second, something that prevents the knight from enforcing the fork to win the bishop. King g3 gets you in trouble instantly because of this check, and white wins very easily. The only way to make some progress is to just pick up the bishop. But when this check is materialized, this is the only way to stop black from queening and winning the game. And I think we have come to the end of puzzle number 2. The third and final puzzle we are going to look at is one that relates to the legendary Bobby Fischer. Bobby Fischer back in the day was approached by someone. His name is not important right now, but this is how the story goes. Fischer was approached and a puzzle was given to him. A bet was placed on the puzzle, and Fischer had been given a certain time to solve it. The puzzle looked amazingly easy, but there is a difference between this puzzle and the other two we looked at. This puzzle was not blind, and Fischer was allowed to have a full view using a diagram and all related pieces. Let us look at this puzzle, and let's hope you are able to solve it. On a show Bobby Fischer attended that was aired on the small box, Johnny Carlson presented him with a puzzle, which Fischer solved in just 15 seconds. Let's bring up the initial setup of this puzzle and then take it on from here. What we have is a lone black king sitting in the center of the board, and more specifically on e4. White has the king on e1, his queen next to him on d1, and then the two bishops on c1 and f1 respectively. White is to start, and what we are looking for is a checkmate in 3. This problem looks amazingly simple, but please bear in mind the biggest chess mind at the time simply failed to solve it. He went on to lose the bet, so how hard does this look? Can you try and solve it? It doesn't matter if you have seen this before. In case you didn't, maybe this is the perfect time to get to the bottom of this last puzzle. Fischer tried and couldn't do it. Is this the hardest mate in 3 puzzle ever devised? Just try it before we get to see how we need to solve it, and then you can compare your efforts against what we will do. I guess this would be the right time to freeze or pause the video, and next time you hear noise, we shall go through the solution. Okay, if you still need more time, pause again until you are ready to continue. Check this out. If you apply this queen check from d3, bishop h3 and king f6, now we must find the mate in 1 if we need to meet the criteria of this puzzle. And because this sounds just about impossible, we need to come back to the drawing board. Let's put the pieces back to where they came from and try again. There is a key to what we need to do. What you actually need to do is to be able to control most of the squares on the board where the king can visit. A good point to start with is this bishop move into b5. King f5 and queen d6 will shut off the king's access to many squares. In fact, as things stand, the king has only got g4 and e4. If you place him on g4, right after this check lands on your doorstep, there is a mate in 1, but it would not be mission accomplished because we are looking at 4 moves, not 3. Coming back, let's try another combination. In with this queen check from e2, king f5, queen e7, king g4, and right after this check appears, the king would escape with move number 4, and only here he gets checkmated via this bishop move. It's again 1 move too many. There are already some signs that we have thrown in to help you understand how to cover many squares with the minimum of moves. Backtracking to the initial setup, what if we show the first move, which is the most important of them all? It's this bishop move into c4. What you do with this type of response is to block the king's access to all outposts but 2. This king has f5 and e5. If you place the king on e5, what happens if you apply this queen check? Right now, there is only a single king move. So by forcing him to find f6, this is how you do it, and the mate is achieved in just 3 moves. Having said this, there is approach number 2. After bishop c4, we tried king e5. What if now we try king f5? Queen f3 checking the king, and king e5, leads to this outcome, and it's again a checkmate, which is also achieved in just 3 moves. So this is approach number 3, is it not? There are another 2 different ways to do the same and get to a mate in 3. After bishop c4 and king f5, the other way to do it is to bring the queen across in this way. This check from h5 will lead to a checkmate in just a single move. If king f6, queen g5 is a checkmate, and if we come back by 1 move, if you choose to go for this king move to e4, this would be the way to qualify for a mate in 3, and this would be good enough. When we see how the puzzle works, everything looks so easy. However, since Bobby Fischer was unable to solve this puzzle, it wasn't just losing the bet, but many people took the opportunity to undermine his credibility. By the way, have you been at all able to solve any one of these 3 puzzles, and if not, have you been able to come any closer to 1 or more solutions? And this was it for today. 3 puzzles that you do not get to see every day, and there are plenty more in case you enjoyed them. Drop us a line to let us know, and we shall be acting accordingly. And this was our 18th video to date. We sincerely hope to see you again soon and God bless.